So Nuala, what is a wormery?
A wormery is a compost system for homes where you're using a worm called the branding worm or red worm or tiger worm. It's got lots of different names on it, where it's really, you're using your food scraps from the kitchen.
So how do you make a wormery?
Well, a wormery, the essential part is that it's a covered container. It can be made out of wood or plastic, whatever you have at home. But the main thing to remember, it's got a large surface area. You're not going for depth in a wormery, it's a large open area for the worms to live in.
Perfect. And so where do you put the wormery around your home?
Well, we'd always recommend a nice shaded spot in your back garden. Remember, these are living inside in your wormery, the worms. So if it was a very sunny spot, they might overheat in the wormery during the summertime. So a nice shaded spot is always advised.
Can you put it inside, like in a garage or something like that?
Yeah, a garage is always great, or a shed or that, because in the wintertime it can get quite cold. We've had quite cold winters over the past number of years. So no harm if you have space in your garage or a shed, no problem to put it into your garage or shed.
So now that we have the bin and it's put in place in a shading area or in the shed, how do we get it set up to get the worms to do all the work they're to do?
Well, the first thing to remember is the worms love a dark and damp environment, so we have to create a bedding for them first off. Very simply done. All you need is some leaves, some shredded paper and some water. And we can do that now if you want, Craig.
That sounds perfect. Let's do that now, Lola.
So here's our worm bin here, and what we've got just down in front of me is a container with some water in it. Remember, worms love damp environments, so what we'll do is we'll just get some leaves and some shredded paper, mix it with water, and we'll add it in to our wormery as the bedding for the worms. So a couple of handfuls of shredded paper going in. And then just over here in the container, we've got some leaves. Now, if you don't have shredded paper, an ordinary newspaper will do, and just rip it up into small pieces will do absolutely fine. I've just made a small bit there. So all you do then is you start to just drain off the water. There is holes in the bottom of the wormery here, and then just throw the bedding in as you go. So now that our bedding is in place, we need to start to add your worms and your food scraps from the kitchen. So these are all plant-derived food scraps. So the first thing is, with composting, all food has to be buried into the actual system itself. So we'll just make a space there for your food scraps to go in. So to finish, all we do is we take some whole sheets of newspaper and cover over the contents of your wet bedding in the wormery. The idea with this is to minimise flies that might be attracted to the wormery, but also for you to know if the bedding in the wormery is damp enough and that. If it gets too dry, like so here, we know that we need to add a little bit of water moisture, because remember, the worms like damp conditions in the wormery. And
so basically, if the paper is dry, then we need to then wet the bedding to make sure the bedding's wet enough.
That's it, yeah, to make sure the worms are nice and damp.
That's right. And if the papers are wet, then the bedding is just fine.
That's
that right?
That's absolutely it.
Perfect. Then we're all set to go, right?
Yep.
Happy worms, happy home.